I'd like to introduce to you a man that I'm sure many of you have heard of. Many of you perhaps have read his writings. Many of you know of his vital and important contributions to health literature. Perhaps many of you have never met him. Dr. Herbert, yes.
Just one word. I don't want to take your time. Years ago, as you remember, Coué came to this country, and one of his patients was a lady suffering from tremendous bow legs. And she went to Coué, said, "Can I get help for this trouble of mine?" And Coué said, "Oh, yes, you say my formula 100 times tonight, and you go to bed, and you'll see the result tomorrow." So when this lady retired, she forgot the number, and instead said it 200 times. The result was that she woke up the next morning knock-kneed. That just shows you the dangers of over-treatment. I'm going to pass on now to the man, above all others, who does not believe in over-treatment, Dr. Herbert Shelton.
We have with us, I'm not going to introduce him because I don't think he wants to be introduced. We have with us a very fine gentleman who flew all the way out here, he and his wife, from Buffalo, New York, to attend these lectures. They have missed but one of them. And he told me this evening, just before we got started, "You're leaving at the wrong time. See this crowd here this evening." I think the crowd is perhaps might be partly due to the fact that we have computation. In the same building, yes. Nonetheless, during the past few days, I've had the pleasure of lecturing to most of you, and during that time I have received numerous questions about how to cure arthritis and asthma and various other things. While I've emphasized to you the fact that I am not engaged in the curing business and that curing disease is a voodoo program, I have continued to say to you, I'm going to give you the details for that Friday. Some of those on the front seat had a great bit of fun out of that, but those of you who were kept asking what to do for this, that, and the other, were really trying to run before you learned to walk. It was necessary that you get the preceding lectures before you could be prepared to understand all that you need to understand in caring for yourself with these various conditions that you ask about. Tonight I want to tell you how you may recover health, providing, of course, the damage to some of your vital organs is not so great that it is beyond vital redemption. Walking down the street the other day here in the city, I passed a bookstore. It was closed. But there were books in the window on display. And I saw one that was entitled, "How to Live with Your Allergy." Another, "How to Live with Your Ulcer." Another, "How to Live with Your Migraine Headache." There were other "How to Live with Your Doubles" there. They were written by medical men. And I thought, as I looked at those titles, there is an open confession of absolute failure. How to live with your diseases, not how to recover your health. A man came in to see me this afternoon. You know, we have people in this audience from San Francisco and from Oakland and from Phoenix And for the first 4 evenings, we had one man who lived almost on the California-Oregon line. And we have them from south of us. I don't believe there's any from the west. But this man came in, he was from Phoenix. And he described his troubles to me. And he told me of his visit to a physician in Phoenix. And among other troubles, he had a contraction of the rectal sphincter, or the little circular muscle that closes the rectum and keeps it closed. And the physician told him, we can't do anything about it, but I'll give you these pills that will relax that sphincter. And the man said, well, doctor, how can you give me a pill that will relax that muscle without relaxing other muscles that shouldn't be relaxed? And the physician said, now get this, these are educated pills. They've gotten their research down pat when they start educating pills, haven't they? They go right to the right spot and do just what they want them to do. They stay out of the wrong places and never do anything that they're not wanted to do. Naturally, you get the desired result. Only you have to keep going back and going back and going back to be cured all over again. Once you're cured, you're sick again in a few days or a few weeks, and you've got to be cured all over again. It reminds me very much of an incident that happened in New York some years ago. A wealthy man who lived upon Riverside Drive had toured Europe, and he came back like many people do who go for trips with a trunk full of souvenirs. He engaged a truckman at the dock to take the souvenirs up to his home on Riverside Drive, and he said, when you get there, ring the bell and the butler will show you where to put them. So the truckman got the trunk of souvenirs on his shoulder, and he rang the bell, and the butler came to the door, and the truckman says, well, where do you want me to put this trunk? And the butler says, take it up the stairs there. So he took it upstairs, and he set it down, and he came back down, and he said to the butler, why did you mock me? And the butler said, I didn't mock you, I stutter myself. So the truckman said, you come and go with me, I'll take you to a man that'll kill you. He cured me. That's the way these cures work. I'm not going to give you any cures tonight. It is the same law of gravity that floats a balloon. I mean, the law of gravity that floats the balloon is the same law of gravity that dashes it to earth again. We have no change in the law when the balloon goes up or down. We have merely a change in condition. The same law of gravity that floats a ship under one set of conditions sinks that ship under another set of conditions. There is again no change in the law. There is a change only in the conditions under which that law operates. The same law of gravity that makes and preserves a stick of dynamite under one set of conditions explodes that stick of dynamite. I didn't mean the same law of gravity. I meant the same chemical affinity, or the same law of chemical affinity that makes and preserves a stick of dynamite under one set of conditions, explodes that stick of dynamite under another set of conditions. Here again, we do not have a change in law. We have merely a change in conditions. The same law, operating under different conditions, gives us different results. And so also, in the realm of life, the same law of life that gives us health under one set of conditions gives us disease under the other. Now, just as the mechanic can produce a boat, the engineer, perhaps I should have said, that will float, or he can produce one that will sink. That is, he can provide the necessary conditions for one or the other of those effects. And just as the chemist can provide the necessary conditions for producing and maintaining a stick of dynamite, or for exploding it, by knowing the law and the conditions of its operation, so we too, if we know the laws of life and the conditions for its varied operations in producing its varied and different effects, can produce health and disease at will. I do not intend for you to understand me to say by that this evening that our knowledge of such things is already sufficiently great that we can do all of that to our satisfaction. I do want you to understand, however, that we do know a sufficient amount about the laws of life and a sufficient amount about the conditions of the operations of those laws to produce their various effects, that it is possible for us to live in such a way and to provide such conditions of life under which to live as to provide us excellent health and to maintain that health indefinitely. Life is not, as we have been taught in the past, a matter of haphazard. It is not a matter of chance. It is subject to law, as much so as everything else in this universe. And instead of studying the laws of life in the past, instead of studying causes and effects, we have been chasing for more than 3,000 years the will-o'-the-wisp of cures around the same old mulberry bush or gooseberry bush. As fast as one cure faded away, we brought on two more. The first requisite in the recovery of health then involves a condition that has been all down the ages neglected by all of the schools of so-called healing. It is this: remove or correct all of the causes that are impairing and have impaired health. The methods of caring for the sick in the past have ignored cause. As I explained to you on the first evening you were here, the old methods were simply this: if you had a diarrhea, give something to check the bowels. If you were constipated, give something to force the bowels to move. If you had a headache, give something to sandbag the nerves into insensibility so you couldn't feel the ache. If you have gas and distress, take the Bellams or Alka-Seltzer. Treat the symptoms. If you go through a medical textbook on the practice of medicine and take up disease after disease as you go along, you will be surprised at the monotony and the frequency with which a phrase such as this will follow in giving the care of each disease. Treat the symptoms as they arise. Or, treatment is symptomatic. Over and over and over you read those statements in disease after disease. Any standard work on the practice of medicine that you may consult will supply you with an abundance of such statements. Treat symptoms, ignore causes. That is the reason that the world has never been restored to health. Can you sober up a drunk man while he continues to drink? Can you cure the tire following work or exercise while the man continues his activity? Do you think some serum or gland extract will restore potency to a sensualist while he continues his sensual indulgences? Do you imagine for a minute that you can cure a burnt finger by putting it putting salve of some kind on it, and then putting it back into the fire. Cause must be removed. That is the first requisite of recovery. Any program of caring for the sick that ignores cause is an illusion. No matter how scientific it may be said to be, no matter how plausible the arguments offered for it may seem, if it ignores cause, if it does not remove cause, it will fail. Now, how can you remove cause? In the first place, in order to remove cause, you must know what it is. If you believe cause is an evil spirit, as the ancients believed, and as millions of people living on the earth still believe, then of course you will resort to methods of exorcism, methods to cast out the spirit. The drug system arose out of just such methods. I've had questions here during the course of these talks about herbs. Why do I condemn herbs? Well, I've pointed out that I only condemn poisonous herbs. And these are the ones that are called medicinal herbs. And they were used originally because when they were taken into the body, they occasioned nausea and vomiting and diarrhea and griping and pains of various kinds. And this was thought to be evidence that they were driving out the devil. If you have switched from the idea that disease is due to germs to the idea, due to evil spirits, to the idea that they're due to malignant germs or malevolent viruses, you have the same conception, although you've dressed it in a modern Mother Hubbard. If this is your idea of disease, or of the cause of disease, then you will go after that cause with hammer and tongs. Instead of trying to exorcise evil spirits, you will be trying to exorcise evil germs and evil viruses. And it'll be the patients that will really be exorcised. The graveyards are full of them that are there anywhere from 2 to 100 years earlier than they should have gone there because of that kind of treatment. To find cause, we do not look to the symptoms. I remember I was in New York at the time the first doctor killed that. Then I arranged my practice so I could see my patients in the evening, and I went back to school. And for 7 years I studied all of the medical specialties, endocrinology, genitourinology, and on through the rest of them, eye, ear, nose, and throat, and so on. And he said I did this so that I could fully examine and fully care for every patient that came to me. And I said, Doctor, after you have made all of your examinations, after you have made all of your tests, after you have done all of your thumping of the chest and looking at the tongue and counting of the pulse and all the other things that you go through, what have you found? He hesitated a minute. I said, you've been looking for symptoms, for results, for effects, for end products, not causes. He said, etiology is very important. I always look for the etiology. I said, do you, doctor? You mean you look for enlarged tonsils, abscessed teeth, infected appendices, and so forth? He said, always. I always search for those things. But I said, doctor, those are parts of the patient's pathology. They're not causes. That's part of the trouble of the patient. And that's the kind of causes they seek to remove when they seek to remove any at all. What they really remove is the contents of your purse, along with organs that you should keep. In the field of cause, in the field of symptoms, you do not find causes. I'm going to quote a statement made by Dr. Carrington. The other night I told you that searching through symptoms, searching through effects for causes, is similar to the fire chief running out to a place where a house is burned down, gathering up a bucket full of the ashes and rushing them down to the laboratory and having them analyzed to find out what caused the fire. Literally, when they examine the urine of the patient, they are examining the ashes of the body. And they're looking in the ashes for the causes of the fire. I told you also of the case where the woman was crying for days at a time. And the physician collected a large part of the tears, a large accumulation of the tears that she shed, and he sent them to the laboratory to have them analyzed. And he found that they were made up of water and a little salt. But he didn't find out what was making the woman cry. Now, I know that you like to pay out good money for diagnoses and for examinations that find results and enable the physician to fix an unpronounceable Greek name to your troubles. And then you're happy, you know what's wrong with you. Well, if you do, you're better off than he is. He doesn't. To find cause, you must look in another field. I explained to you the other night how toxemia is developed. I explained to you how secretion and excretion are checked. I explained to you how you waste your nerve energy and lower your functioning power, and how the normal wastes of life accumulate in the body consequent upon a checking of elimination. Here is the cause of your disease. This condition of self-poisoning and auto-generated poisoning that has resulted from enervation or lowered functioning power. Now we go into the life of our patient to find causes. How do we do it? Well, when a patient comes to my health room for care, I sit him down or her down in the office, and I say to him, now, after I listen to their symptoms, you have to listen to these things. They want to talk about their symptoms. They just dearly delight in talking about their symptoms. Sometimes you want to see my operation and things of that kind. But after listening to all that, then commences the real search for causes. What do you have for breakfast? What do you have for your lunch? What do you have for your evening meal? What do you drink? What do you take between meals? In the evening before you retire, I go into the eating habits of that patient thoroughly. Then comes the next thing. Do you use coffee, tea, tobacco, alcohol, soda fountain slops, drugs of any kind? We go into all of the poison habits that the patient may be addicted to. Following that, we take up the emotional life of the patient. Are they worried? Are they working under tension? Is there domestic disharmony? Are they unhappy? Are they filled with fears and anxieties? And so on. We go through their emotional life. Then their sex life. Their working conditions. Their hours of work. The kind of work. Their sleep. Their sleeping habits. Do they get enough sleep? Do they retire early in the evening or early in the morning? I study the entire life of that individual. When I'm through, then I know what that person is doing that he should not do. And I know what he has left undone that he should be doing. And then I can say to him, here are the causes of your disease. Here are the causes that have resulted in the lowering of your nerve energy to the point where elimination is checked. Here are the causes that have lowered nerve energy to the point where digestion is impaired. Here is the reason you're full of gas. Here is the reason you're constipated. Here is the reason you have catarrh, sinus trouble, which is a catarrh too, asthma, another catarrh. Hay fever, a catarrh also. Metritis, inflammation of the womb, that's a catarrh also. Colitis, another catarrh. Here are the reasons that you have these troubles. You have been living in such a way that you have used up your nerve energy in excess. You have sex elimination so that the normal waste of life have accumulated in your blood, in your lymph, in your tissues. Now, how are we going to get rid of it? We've already got impaired elimination. How are we going to eliminate it? That is the next step that is the first step in removing cause, eliminating the toxins that have accumulated in the body. Of course, we must always correct that mode of living. If the patient smokes, we've got to stop him from smoking. Do you know, I have them coming to my place, and they know before they get there that they're going to have to give up tobacco. So they sit down outside and have their final smoke before they come in. Some of them, on the other hand, will stop downtown and have a final big meal before they come out to go on a fast. A preacher once brought his father to me. He says, I don't know whether you can keep him here or not. He likes to drink. But he also liked to smoke. So he had a good smoke before he came in the house. He stuck it out. He got rid of his supposed desire for alcohol, and he got rid of his desire for tobacco, and he got well of his troubles. So far as I know, he's still well. But I point out to you that they hug these old habits, and they must have that last fling at them before they stop. If they're gluttonous eaters, they've got to be taught moderation in eating. If they are wrongly combining their foods, they have to be taught how to properly combine them. If they're using tea and coffee, this must be discontinued. If their emotional life is such that it is tearing them apart and keeping them torn up, they must be re-educated emotionally. If their sex life is wrong, they must be taught a proper mode of sexual indulgence. All along the line, every intervening factor must be corrected. Not one or two, not three or four, but all of them. Because in order to recuperate nerve energy, it is necessary that you stop all nerve leaks. But we still haven't gotten increased functioning power for those organs of elimination, so they can clean out the accumulated waste. How are we going to do it? We can start it immediately. If on the same circuit here with this light, we had a plug over there in that column, and we plugged in an electric iron, and we switched on the iron. The very instant we switched on the iron, we would see this light grow dim. And then, in a minute, we switch off the iron, and the very instant we do it, the light brightens up. You see the same thing in your bathtub. If you've got the water running full force, and somebody turns on the water in the next room, the force of the flow of water in your bathtub is lessened or reduced. And then if they turn off the water, the force of flow of water in your bathtub is increased. You can see the same thing in yourself. If sometime or other when you're out in the country, you undertake to run at top speed and work a simple problem in mathematics at the same time. The very simplest of problems. You see how impossible it is to expend an equal amount of energy through two channels of expenditure at the same time and make either one of them vigorous. Now, by cutting down, as we do when we switch off that iron, by cutting down on expenditure through one channel, energy is available through use in another channel, for use through another channel. So by going to bed, which means rest, physical rest, stopping your activities and going to bed, for physical rest, you get an immediate saving of energy. All the energy that is ordinarily expended in your working activities, in your walking, in your talking, and all the other activities that you carry on through the day is conserved. And that energy is now available for use in temporarily more urgent work. If you poise your mind, stop your worries, dismiss your anxiety, the energy that is commonly expended through emotional activities, is also available for more important work. If you get away from noise, from movies, and from other things that require the use of your eyes, and stop all of your sensory activities as far as possible, this is sensory rest. First we had physical, then mental, and now sensory rest. And all the energy that you conserve by ceasing these activities is available for use in increasing the work of elimination. But now we have another form of rest, that of physiological rest. This is the kind of rest that we mean when we talk about fasting. It has been estimated, and it may as well be admitted that in the very nature of things, the estimate cannot be accurate, but it has been estimated that it requires as much energy to digest and to handle 3 square meals a day as it does to do 8 hours of hard physical labor. Now that may sound incredulous to you, but when you think that digestive tract of yours is anywhere from 28 to 32 feet long, and it's one long muscular tube in continuous action in handling those 3 square meals plus, you can readily understand that a lot of energy is being used in carrying on that work. And the heart must carry that material when it's absorbed into the bloodstream through the body. The liver must take care of its part of it, and the kidneys must eliminate part of it, and so on. And the lungs must provide oxygen for oxidizing it. When all of this activity is stopped, as in fasting, a great saving in functioning energy is made. And this energy, too, is available for use in, at least temporarily, more urgent work. The result of a program of physical, mental, sensory, and physiological rest is an immediate increase in elimination. It can be seen with the naked eye, in as far as the urine is concerned, within a few hours. Urine that may have been almost as colorless as water at the outset of the fast will, within a short time, be almost inky black. This means that the kidneys are busy really getting rid of a lot of dirt. This is the beginning of recovery. Now you want to know what kind of treatment shall I take along with this? None. Every time you give treatment, drugs, massages, manipulation, electrical treatment, even so-called psychotherapy treatment, you waste part of the precious energy of your patient. Hot bath, cold bath, these cause an expenditure, a wasteful expenditure of energy in resisting the heat and the cold. These things ought to be left entirely alone if you want to get well. You can take those things. Dr. Carrington pointed out to you how the lady overdid the day by day in every way I'm getting better and better slogan, and instead of just straightening out her bow legs, she became knock-kneed. Many people are in their graves today that need not have been there because they have resorted to measures that waste their energy. Rest, rest, rest is the way to recuperation. It is the way to conservation of energy, stimulation of any kind, drug stimulation, mechanical stimulation, electrical stimulation, mental stimulation. Any type of stimulation means an expenditure of energy. Energy that ought to be conserved, that ought to be saved for use in important work. And it is important to get well, and to get well as quickly as possible. Being sick is expensive. Getting well is expensive. The more completely one can relax, mentally and physically, the more nearly one can hibernate, the more rapidly will one eliminate, and the more rapidly will one recover. Now, remember that getting well involves removing cause, involves these three factors. First, correcting the mode of living. Second, restoring functioning power. How? By rest and correcting the mode of living. And third, eliminating the accumulated toxins from the body. When we have accomplished these, the patient just grows easily and naturally into good health. How long does it take? That varies with the individual, with the condition of the tissues of that individual, with the profoundness of the innervation, with the degree of intoxication, with the age of the individual. Young people recover much more rapidly than older ones. Everybody wants to get well in a hurry. Very few people come to me in the 50s and 60s without wanting to get well right away. They've taken 40 to 50 to 60 years to get in their present condition, and they want to get well overnight. In a week, they'd like to get well. It can't be done. Time is another element that is required in recovery. The next step in the recovery of health is that of supplying the body with the primordial requisites of a healthy life. First, you remove the causes of impairment, and second, you supply the causes of health. Those are your two steps. What are the causes of health? What are the primordial requisites of life? I know what they are. Penicillin, streptomycin, oromycin, tetanus shots. Sure. Adam and Eve had those things in the Garden of Eden. They couldn't have lived the first year there if they hadn't had them. You know that. Speaking of those things, let me remind you that they are very popular, these miracle drugs. You hear very much about the wonders they're accomplishing. You can't notice any actual decrease in the death rate. Your friends and relatives that are taking them seem to be dying about as usual and suffering as much as ever. But let us go back a few years. There was a time when mercury, in some form or another, was used in a greater number of diseases than penicillin has been used in. Mercury was the sheet anchor of treatment at one time, and it was accused of doing all the marvelous, lawless cures that penicillin is accused of performing. Then there came a time when quinine became the miracle drug. Quinine was given for everything that you had. Quinine has quite a history. A priest, a Spanish priest, gives us the story that he found the Indians in South America using the bark of a tree down there. They called it the cinchona tree after one of the Spanish queens, I believe it was, to remedy and to prevent malaria. So he introduced it into Europe. And because he was a priest and not a physician, the medical profession wouldn't have anything to do with it. They fought him. Other priests began to use it. And they had quite a fight between the priest and the physician. Finally, the physician, seeing that the priests were becoming too popular with their alleged cures, took up the use of quinine, and they took it away from the priest. And it became the miracle drug of the time. And then there came a little time a little later when alcohol, usually in the form of brandy, alcohol was the miracle drug. They gave you alcohol for weakness. Well, they gave it to you for everything from a cold to cancer. Everything from blackhead to tuberculosis. They still do it to some extent, but not like they used to. Or they never give up anything. They're still using some of the old drugs that the ancient Egyptians used. The pharmacopoeia is a storehouse of trash that they have accumulated through more than 3,000 years of era. Many of you are old enough to remember sulfa drugs. Some of you, I think, could even remember the antihistamine. But I wonder how many of you remember that not so many years ago, snake venom was almost a panacea. Every time there was a medical convention held anywhere, some new diseases were reported to have yielded to snake venom. Then came artificial fever. Remember it? Why, they were curing everything with artificial fever. Even that famous disease that has no existence outside of the overheated and over-intoxicated imagination of the medical profession, syphilis, was being cured by the fever treatment. And then, to reverse the process, they came in with the freezing process. They would freeze you instead of heating you or baking you. All these panaceas, they come and go, as I say so often. The cures may come and the cures may go, but the curing goes on forever. And the amazing thing about it is that a supposedly intelligent population continues to fall for every new cure that the curemongers and the treatment peddlers bring forth.
This is the end of side one. Please turn the cassette over. Turn the cassette over. Turn the cassette over. Turn the cassette over. Turn the cassette over.
If tomorrow morning the newspapers announce the discovery of another miracle drug, such as Axe or cortisone, the people will rush off after it in droves and spend their hard-earned money and suffer and die as a consequence of taking it. And the medical profession and the manufacturers of drugs will make all they can out of it while the making is good, because they believe in the old adage, make hay while the sun shines. And then another drug will follow it, and another, and another, and the people will rush off after it. A few years ago, it was reported that miracles were being performed at the grave of a priest up in Boston. And great crowds of people were flocking to that grave from all over the country to be cured of their troubles. And I saw criticisms of those people and of the church for permitting it by medical men. Can you imagine a group of men that peddle cures all the time of the kind they do, criticizing somebody else for having a cure? But the question that came to my mind when I saw these criticisms was just this. Where did all these sick people come from to go to that priest's grave if the medical profession was curing them so well as they said they were? No, these things are not among the primordial requisites of life. We build health with the same elements, the same factor with which old Mother Nature has built building and maintaining and will build and maintain the whole animal and vegetable kingdom throughout all past eternity and for all time to come. What are they? Food and water and air and light and temperature and rest and sleep and exercise and cleanliness and hope and faith and love and cheer and good fellowship. Good mental attitude, in other words. These are the elements out of which health is synthesized. These are the things with which you grow from ovumhood to adulthood. These are the elements that can be transformed into living structure and into living function. These are the elements that provide for the expression of energy, that provide the necessary conditions of health, providing, of course, they are properly used. The abuse of these elements is as productive of disease as are the other habits and indulgences that have been discussed during the course of this talk, or of these talks. We can make ourselves sick by overeating and by imprudent eating of the best foods the world affords. But very few of us eat the best foods the world affords. Once I cared for a patient who had done a lot of traveling over the world during his life before reaching my place. He had been in Alaska. He had been in the South Pacific. He had been in South America. He had spent a year among a tribe of headhunters in South America. He had been here and there. And after he had been at my place a while and had recovered health, he said, "You know, I have been thinking. I've been all over the world. Not all over the world, but over a large part of the world. I've eaten whatever was served me, however it was prepared. An Eskimo cook in Alaska prepared my food for me. A Negro cook somewhere else prepared my food for me. An Indian cook in South America prepared it for me. Some other type of cook here and there. These people were ignorant. They knew nothing of food preparation. They knew nothing of diet. They knew nothing of the needs of my body. They knew nothing of the elements of the food. They didn't know what the cooking process was doing to the food. They didn't know how to combine it or anything else. And they just put it down there as they prepared it, and I ate it. And that's what most of us do in our eating practices. We give really very little to no attention to our diet. If it tastes good, and it can be made to taste good, any cook can make it taste good. With her seasonings, her sugar, her sauces, and so forth, she can make anything taste good. I remember once being in the kitchen of not a famous, but a very popular eating place where only the elite had their evening meals. People who had plenty of money and who could dress in evening attire to eat. They ate in this place, and I was in the kitchen when the owner of the place came in and looked into the icebox. This was in days before we had electrical refrigeration. And there was some beef in the icebox that was already green from mildew on it. And she said to the cook, "You better prepare this meat this evening. It won't be any good tomorrow." And it was prepared, and it was served to these people, and they ate it. You'd be amazed at how much of that stuff you buy in your hotels and your restaurants to eat yourself. There are people, of course, who wouldn't eat meat unless it were thoroughly ripened. Poultry has to be so rotten that if it's hung up by the neck breaks out spontaneously and it falls down. A turkey or a duck has to be that rotten. They call it ripe, and they say it's sweet that way. They won't eat it unless it's thoroughly ripened. They like their cheese like Chinese eggs, very old. Yes, with worms in it. You like to eat that kind of stuff, or do you? You don't? Well, then perhaps you don't, but do you eat white bread? Do you take white rice? Do you eat canned goods? Everybody says no. How about the cake and the pie and the candy and the beer and all of those things that you like to have? These are the kind of things which the American diet is commonly made up. And they're not the kind of foods out of which to build strong, healthy bodies. And then there's water. I wonder how many of you really drink water. They say that in France, only sissies drink water. They drink wine over there, it seems. But that is not a drink, that is a poison. And that's what we get in this country. Not drinks, but poison. Our city water supplies all over the country are filled with drugs. Wholesale and indiscriminate drugging in advance of that much-needed diagnosis before you prescribe for your patient. As I said to you the other night, the medical profession of this country is determined that you shall not have unpoisoned water to drink. What you need is pure water. And air. What kind of air do you breathe? Well, I've been here long enough to know. You don't have to answer. You need pure air. You aren't getting it. She says it's polluted. I think that's the understatement of the year, don't you? But that's the kind of air you're getting. Did you ever notice that the copper, well, maybe you don't have any gutters and downspouts on your houses, but if you notice, they used to last for years, and now they have holes in them before they're very old from the gases and stuff in the air. Even your foods are poisoned. The farmer poisons them. The food processor poisons them. You're living in a more or less poisoned world. And you're sitting around saying, what are we going to do about it? Well, what are you going to do about it? Demand the other kind and don't take the poison kind. Those of you remember that famous slogan of William Jennings Bryan when he was fighting the evolution theory in the schools? He said, the hand that writes the paycheck rules the school. Well, they don't, but you can. The hand that writes the paycheck can determine what it buys, if it'll give attention to what it buys and demand what it wants. I hear people sitting around here saying, what can we do, what can we do? The government's doing this and the government's doing that. Do you know that government would desert the ship like a bunch of drowning rats if the people of this country rose in their collective might and demanded what they want? Anytime you get tired of keeping up that unnecessary luxury called the state, you can get rid of it. Nothing but a burden on you. People tell me, oh, but we've got to have a head, and I think most of you need one. Think of what would happen if we didn't have a government. There'd be robbing, well, there already is. There'd be killing, we have plenty of that. But I defy you to think of any evil that could possibly follow the elimination of the state that is 1/100th as bad as the 2 world wars that we just went through. And I defy you to find a means of carrying on a world war without powerful states to carry it on. States make war, not people. But as long as you're going to put up with this evil and this enemy of mankind, never was anything but a class agent. If you go into the history of it, you'll discover that it was organized originally by a bunch of robbers to enable them to keep their loot. And the same robbers are still keeping their loot, using the same instrument. But so long as you're going to tolerate it, and so long as you're going to give at least 75% of your income every year to it, you ought to see to it that it serves you, not that it serves the interest. You can have unpoisoned food when you demand it, and you can have the poisoning of food outlawed when you demand it. It's up to you. We're going to ask as many of you as will to stay over after the question period this evening, so we can introduce you to the local chapter of the Los Angeles Natural Hygiene Society. This society is being organized all over the United States, the American Natural Hygiene Society Incorporated. One of our aims is the abolition of the poisoning of our food supply. That's just one of our aims. The big aim is the education of the people of this country and ultimately of the world in a hygienic way of life. When we become strong enough, and we're headed in that direction, we're going to get rid of all the laws that compel you to patronize any school of so-called healing. There isn't going to any longer be any compulsory examinations and compulsory tests. There aren't going to be any more compulsory hospitalizations of patients. There's going to be no more compulsory vaccinations and inoculations. There aren't going to be any more court decrees ordering parents to submit their children to operations or to blood transfusions. And those are just some of our objectives. But we intend to put an end to this domination of the life of the people by the old poisoning and carving school of killing.